Makes it fine.
What page? Zechariah.
I don't know. It's on 15:12 in my Bible.
14, 17.
14:1.
Second page.
And I'll be reading chapter 7. I discovered something. I either need new glasses, which I can't afford, so I went and got me a large print Bible.
So you discovered you're old.
So I'm discovering that I'm old.
Welcome to the
Older.
Welcome to our
It happens to everybody, right?
Zechariah, the 7th chapter. Now in the 4th year of King Darius, and the word of the Lord came to Zechariah on the 4th day of the 9th month, the month of Kislev. The people of Bethel sent Jazzar and Regimelech together with their men to entreat the Lord by asking the priests of the house of the Lord Almighty and the prophets, should I mourn and fast in the 5th month, as I have done for so many years? And then the word of the Lord Almighty came to me. Ask all the people of the land and the priests, when you fasted and mourned in the 5th month and the 7th month for the past 70 years, was it really for me you fasted? And when you were eating and drinking, were you not just feasting for yourself? Are these not the words of the Lord proclaimed through the earlier prophets when Jerusalem and its surrounding towns were at rest and prosperous, and the Negev and the western foothills were settled? And the word of the Lord came again to Zechariah. This is what the Lord Almighty said. Administer true justice. Show mercy and compassion to one another. Do not oppress the widow or the fatherless, the foreigner or the poor. Do not plot evil against each other. But they refused to pay attention. Stubbornly, they turned their backs and covered their ears. They made their hearts as hard as the flint, and would not listen to the law or to the word of the Lord Almighty, and sent by His Spirit through the earlier prophets. So the Lord Almighty was very angry. When I called, they did not listen. So when they called, I did not listen, says the Lord Almighty. I scattered them with the whirlwind among all the nations, where they were strangers. The land they left behind them was so desolate that no one traveled through it. This is how they made the pleasant land desolate. May God bless the reading of the prophet Zechariah. What makes you glad? Life. Well, the word glad comes from an old German word meaning shining. So if you're glad, you should be shining. Elizabeth right now is shining. She has a glow about her. She has a smile on her face. You can tell that she's glad. She's happy. You can be glad about good things that happen. You can be glad that sometimes something bad didn't happen. You can be glad that an unexpected check came in the mail. You can be glad when medical tests come back negative. You can be glad because of a beautiful sunrise.
Yeah.
Going outside, sitting on your porch early in the morning, listening to the birds sing. You can be glad when you have the presence of someone you love with you. You can be glad when you hear a baby coo in church. Laugh. Babies bring such smiles to our faces. You can be glad just holding hands with one you love. You can be glad after a close call and you come out all right. You can be glad about the promise of the future, the forgiveness of the past. Believe it or not, some people even get glad about religion. Some people get glad about knowing God. The psalmist once sang about God in Psalms 92, verse 4. It says, "For you, Lord, have made me glad through your work." You have made me glad through your work. I suppose gladness is an emotion everybody feels from time to time.
I hope so.
We could run down a whole list of things that make us glad. We could take up the whole hour listening to what makes you glad. But I've often thought, and I've often wondered, what makes God glad? Do you think God is happy all the time? Do you think He has a feeling of gladness all the time? Well, if you look out throughout the Bible, and you look at the story that we read from Zechariah, I don't think God was exactly glad with the people in our story. You know, one reason you and I were created was to give God gladness. And too often, the things of the world gets us and goes in a different direction. We lose sight of God. And God looks down upon us, and He's not very happy with us when He looks down upon us. And we're not doing the things we should be doing. So I want to focus on that question this morning. Who makes you glad, and how do you make God glad? There's three specific things that we get out of the story in Zechariah. The first thing is when you do what you do for Him. When you do what you do for Him, you make Him glad. How many of you do things just for yourself? How many of you do things that you think you're doing for God, but you're only doing it so it makes you look better? Are you really doing it for God, or are you doing it for yourself? When we do things, and we give God the glory for being able to do those things, and we do it in His name, and we don't take the glory for it, then we're making God happy. We're bringing a smile across His face. The children had wandered. They had served God for 70 years, and every year they set aside a day to fast and to grieve over the destruction of Jerusalem. They would dress up in their funeral clothes. They would go without food. They would pray prayers of confession and ask God to bring them back to their homeland. Now the temple was almost finished, and they want to know God hasn't forgotten them. And they want God to know that they have suffered enough. They say, haven't we prayed enough? Haven't we confessed enough? When are you going to take us back home? They were sort of like a child who's sent to the corner, who constantly asks, when can I get out of the corner? Is it time yet? And God sent words through Zechariah. He says, are you really fasting and praying and confessing for me? All those religious rituals that you're going through, asking for repentance, are you really obeying what I've said? Or are you just using me for your glory? Are you just using me so you get what you want, not what I want? You know, that's a very important question for each of us to ask ourselves. Are we religious for ourselves or for God? Yeah. Do we do things for ourselves or do we do them for God? You know, sometimes in our prayer life, our prayers turn into a to-do list for God. Sort of like men, when you get your to-do list from your wife at home. Do all of this and then you get to go out for supper. Do all of this and I'll leave you alone. Sometimes our prayer life is like this. Father, God, you know if you do this, I promise to turn my life over to you. I promise I'll obey your commandments. Now, I'm just doing it because I feel that's what I need to do. You're not doing it because it's what you need to do to make God happy. It's easy to come to church, sit in the pew for an hour, just so you can say, I went to church. That doesn't please God. You don't come to church just to get counted. You should come to church to worship God. You should come to church because you want to learn more about God. You should come to church to give God the glory for the things that He has done. Yep. Worship is about God. It's about God. What about our motives? Who knows the motive behind all the choices that you make? Who do you put behind the choices of all the motives, the choices that you make? Who's the one that you turn to? Do you turn to yourself? Try to do things on your own? Then when you mess it up, you turn to God and say, well, you're my last hope. Help me out, God. Wonder what we'd do if God ever said, forget it. You should have come to me in the first place. You know I'm here, but you wait and give me your last chance. One lady asked another, do you think your husband is hard to please? In which the other replies, I really don't know. I've never tried.
Oh.
Are you and I trying to please God? Are our lives making God glad? The other thing we learned from the story of Zechariah this morning in his prophecy was when we do unto others what is right. I read a story about a true story about a waitress in a restaurant who was carrying an open gallon of Thousand Island dressing to the salad bar. Now she's walking through the crowd and she just happens to trip. When she trips, she sends this salad dressing right down the front of a man wearing a brand new suit, a brand new shirt, and a brand new tie. Well, this guy went ballistic. He started cussing her out, calling her every name in the book. His wife joined him, fussing and cussing at this poor waitress, demanding to see the manager, demanding that the manager write a check right then and there to pay for his suit. One more thing. This happened on a Sunday afternoon, right after church. Who do you think the man was that was wearing the suit? Preacher. The preacher from down the street. Perhaps listening and giving a sermon on your loving your neighbor as yourself didn't sink in with the preacher. One of the most common mistakes we make about religion is the idea of your relationship with God really doesn't have much to do with your relationship with other people. People can be holy and hateful at the same time. But the two don't mix. 1 John 4:20 says, if someone says, I love God, and hates his brother, he's a liar. For he who does not love his brother whom he has seen, how can he love God whom he has not seen? Zechariah makes this connection by listing several ways you make God glad about how you treat others. He says, execute justice. Be merciful, compassionate. Ask for forgiveness of those who wrong you. Do what is right. Hold yourself accountable and hold others as you are accountable. Don't oppress the weak and the helpless. Don't neglect the widow, the fatherless, the stranger, or the poor. Because all these people need help. But it is just as displeasing to God to ignore the weak, the helpless. Don't scheme against each other. Don't hold on to resentment or hatred. Don't be bitter toward others, but let it go. Let your bad feelings go and move on. Because if you hate someone, if you resent someone, then you're resenting God. That's the bottom line. The people of Israel refused to treat the other people right, and they suffered under God's wrath. We should learn from that, people. Yes, our God is a loving God. Our God is a caring God. But if you go against His will, if you go against what He teaches, then there will be wrath to pay. So how can you treat and make God glad? Treat others right. Treat them with kindness, patience, compassion, love. Makes God glad. The final thing is, when you do what He tells you to do. When you do what He tells you to do. That's one of the hardest things Christians do. Is to listen to God and to be obedient children. God doesn't treat and doesn't like disobedient people. Disobedience does not make God glad. One of the greatest joys you can have as a parent is to discover your children obey you. And they truly believe what you tell them is true and best. Good example of that is our two boys. They were being brought up by Kim and I. We went to church. They knew they had better sit in the pew, be quiet, and listen. Because they knew that if their mother pointed to them and said, "Do you want to go outside and have a word of prayer with me?" It wasn't praying that their mother was going to be doing. But it instilled in them that they were to be quiet and obedient to their mother. They were to listen to her. They also grew up with the knowledge that if they didn't do well in school, we'd still love them, no matter what they did. But if they wanted to get somewheres in this world, had to work hard in school. They had to learn. They had to excel. And as far as I know, they're successful at that. But it's things that were instilled as youth, as children, from our parents that we need to learn from. How many of you were brought up in a home that every Sunday, no matter what, you got dressed, you went to Sunday school, you went to church, you sat in the pew, you were quiet, and you went home and fed the preacher? See, when we were growing up, that's what we did. But that's not what we do nowadays. I'm not going to get political here, and I'm not going to get resentful to certain organizations such as Rec Ball and things like that. But until parents start taking a stand against things going on there in church, and start bringing their children to church, we're going to have more and more heathens out there. Obeying God brings gladness to God's heart. God's love for you never changes. He always loves you no matter what you do or don't do. But our attitudes, our words, our actions determine whether his love is mad, sad, or glad. My final question for you this morning: are you bringing a smile to God's face today? Our message hymn is number 451.